Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of If You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. My name is Clive, and today we're going to be talking a lot about Elijah and Elisha. Actually, this is sort of the end for Elijah, and unfortunately, we didn't get through a lot of Elijah's stories, but they're very fascinating. But not to put anything off from Elisha, there's so many miracles that he does, so many amazing miracles that we're going to talk about now. So let's get straight into it. So we're going to be going from 2 Kings chapter 2 all the way to chapter 7. So we're going to miss chapter 1. But, as for the stories going, there isn't too much that we've missed there. So Elisha and Elijah embark on a journey through 4 locations at the beginning here of chapter 2. They go to Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho, and Jordan. At each stop, or at each time they stop, Elijah commands Elisha. He says, "Tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord hath sent me to." So he's basically saying, stay here. The Lord has asked me to go and do this. You don't have to do this. But Elisha always responds the same way every time, 4 times. "As the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee." So, just showing there that whatever you're doing, I'm doing essentially, Now, it's really interesting now what happens. So, verse 9 of chapter 2. "And it came to pass, when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, Ask what I shall do for thee, before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha says, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me." So this is when they finally reached Jordan, the last stop. And Elijah said to Elisha, "Ask whatever you want from me," because he knows he's going to. I mean, it's interesting because we know that a translation is coming, and they know that I'm going to be taken soon. What do you want from me? Now, he asked for a double portion of the Spirit, which is interesting because it's often misunderstood as Elisha asking for like twice as powerful or as holy as Elijah is, but that's not the case. If you look at Deuteronomy, it talks about how the ancient Israelite law, the double portion, was a legal right for the firstborn son. So Elisha is asking to be recognized as Elijah's official spiritual heir and successor, taking leadership over the sons of the prophet, which we're going to talk heavily about the sons of the prophet. The sons of the prophets. And they're essentially these group of prophets. But, there's obviously one prophet, but as we go on, it'll make more sense. So let's go on to verse 11 and 12. This is what Elijah says. "And it came to pass, as they still went up and talked, that behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up in the whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. And he saw him no more. And he took off his clothes and rent them in 2 pieces. And he took up also the mantle of Elijah that fell on him, and went back and stood by the bank of Jordan." So, a few amazing things there. First of all, we talked about Moses possibly being translated into heaven. Nothing like this. He just sort of walked off into the night, into the dark. But Elijah, he's taken up into heaven through a chariot of fire and horses of fire. Quite an amazing sight. And this double portion has been granted to Elisha, and the mantle has fallen upon him. So it's very, very, very interesting visual there, I see. So let's continue on. So now Elisha goes on, and he took the mantle, this is verse 14, of Elijah that fell from him, and smote the waters, and said, Where is the Lord God of Elijah? And when he had smitten the waters, there parted hither and thither, and Elisha went over. So straight away, he's seen this miraculous thing. He's crying out to the Lord, and now the waters part for him. Really, really interesting that, it basically like the beginning, straight away. Let's look at verse 19. "And the men of the city said unto Elisha, Behold, I pray thee, the situation of this city is pleasant, as my Lord seeth, but the water is naught, and the ground barren. And he said, Bring me a new cruse, and put salt therein, and they bring it to him. And he went forth unto the spring of the water, and cast the salt in there, and said, Thus saith the Lord, I have healed these waters, there shall not be from thence any more death nor barren land. So the waters were healed unto this day, according to the sayings of Elisha which he spake. So right there, the next miracle, almost immediately, he goes and heals this water that's making everyone sick. Now, you've got to remember that, okay, all these incredible things have happened to him. Such a spiritual high. Now let's see what happens next. And I'm going to read it, and then we'll get into the context of it. This is verse 23 and 24. And he went up from thence unto Bethel. And as he was going up by the way, there came forth little children out of the city, mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. And he turned back and looked on them, and cursed them in the name of the Lord. And there came forth 2 she-bears out of the wood, and tore 42 children of them. Now let's talk about this. Obviously, on such a spiritual high, but first of all, let's talk about who these people were. So these weren't young children. It talks about them being young children, but the original text actually describes them as Ne'arim. It's described in the Old Testament the same way, that these are young men of fighting age, so they're old enough to go to wars, servants' ages, marriageable adults. So these are, probably we describe them now as young adults. So Elisha's traveling along Upper Road to Bethel at this time. And if we remember what we talked about, the past couple of weeks, Bethel was basically the new spiritual epicenter for the northern kingdoms, where their apostasy was. It was a kingdom where Jeroboam had set up the golden calves to keep people from going to Jerusalem to worship. And so this gang just didn't happen to cross paths with Elijah. They went out of the city specifically to confront him. A massive group of hostile young men swarming this lone prophet on an isolated road. And, it reads here that the she-bear tore 42 of them. So one man against 42, maybe even more. Possibly a few had run away. But then, you'd go back to what he had said. What they said, go up thou, go up, go up. This is a mocking reference to what happens to Elijah, saying that he's gone up. Why don't you go too? Get out of here, basically. Or perhaps they're saying, he went up, why haven't you? Are you not good enough? And then bald head. I mean, yes, very offensive to people who were bald. Baldness was associated with leprosy. And so it's really quite a mocking term. Elisha, to say that he is a bald head is very highly disrespectful and meant to strip him of all of his dignity, label him an outcast of the people. So it's not as simple as a bunch of kids came up to him and said, you're bald, you're bald. It was so much more than that. And, this is the prophet of God, remember. He's not going to go and do something so insane and everyone just move on with their lives. So now we're moving on to chapter 3. And chapter 3 starts out with Ahab's son. Ahab's son is now king. We know that Ahab was quite wicked, but his son is just as wicked as his father. Now, it gets into the story of Moab. Now, the Moab is a neighboring nation of Israel, paying a massive tribute of 100,000 lambs and 100,000 rams with their wool. Now, when Ahab dies, Mesha, the king of Moab, sees an opportunity here to rebel against those people and refuses to pay. So Ahab's son, he forms an alliance with the kings of Judah and kings of Edom. So they come together to go against the people of Moab. And after a 7-day march, they run completely out of water, both for their troops and for their animals. So in verse 11 of chapter 3, and that was a bit of a long-winded way to get here, but I'm just trying to explain the story and to get to the miracles. Because, this is very miracle heavy, this one. So verse 11 of chapter 3. But Jehoshaphat said, Is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that he may inquire of the Lord by him? And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, Here is Elisha, the son of Shaphat, which poured out water on the hands of Elijah. So don't forget, these are, they know who he is. They believe who he is. And so verse 13, Elisha said unto the king of Israel, What have I to do with thee? Basically saying, he's not a good person. So what's Elisha to do? What do you want me to do? Like, you don't follow the things that I say. Why should I do these things for you? Get thee to the prophets of thy father, and go to the prophets of thy mother. And the king of Israel said unto him, Nay, for the Lord hath called these 3 kings together to deliver them out of the hand of Moab. And Elisha said, as the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, surely, were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Israel, I would not look forward thee nor see thee. If you weren't the king, I wouldn't know who you were, basically. Like, you're nothing. You haven't come to me for anything, and now you've come to me for this. If you weren't the king, I wouldn't even know who you are. So for you to come to me and ask of this thing, it's very disrespectful. Verse 16. Elisha is a great man, and he agrees to this anyway, because he's a good person. He knows that, these people that are doing this thing, they shouldn't be punished for the wickedness of the king. So I'm just going to get straight into the miracle. There is a bit where he asks for some music, which is interesting, but I'm going to get into the miracle. Verse 16. And he said, Thus saith the Lord, make this valley full of ditches. For thus saith the Lord, ye shall not see wind, neither see rain, yet the valley shall be filled with water, and may drink both ye, and your cattle, and your beasts. Verse 20, And it came to pass in the morning, when the meat offering was offered, that behold, there came water from the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water. Really interesting, isn't it, that he says to them, okay, you want this miracle? You go and dig these trenches. And then, once you've dug the trenches, the miracle will happen of the Lord will fill these trenches full of water, that you may drink of them. So it's interesting there that he hasn't gone, okay, here's the miracle. Here's some water. I'll turn this air into water, this dirt into water, whatever it is. If you want it, you dig the trenches, the Lord will provide the rest. Now, what's interesting as well about this is when the Moabites look across the valley at sunrise, the morning sun reflects off the water in the ditches. And because the soil of Edom is rich with red materials and mud, like, Australian soil is red. It's almost like blood. Like it really does look quite like blood. So the water looks bright red. So the Moabites assume that the triple alliance of these kings, that each army turned against each other and slaughtered themselves. So now they charge into camp, the Moabites, screaming, Moab to the spoils. Like, whatever happened here, I'm going to get the spoils. They're expecting to plunder graveyards and all these dead people. But instead, they run straight into a fully hydrated army waiting. And so the alliance completely crushed the Moabites and just absolutely demolished them. So the Moabites were clearly losing. Now, here's something quite dramatic. And, there's not much that gets... there is quite a couple of things that are very sad at this point. I'm going to read from Josephus here because it really emphasizes the point. So this is now the king of Moab. But the king of Moab, when he was pursued, endured a siege, and seeing his city in danger of being overthrown by force, and did a thing that showed despair and utmost distress. For he took his eldest son, who was to reign after him, and lifted him up upon the wall, that he might be visible to all his enemies, and offered him as a whole burnt offering to God, whom, when the king saw, they commiserated the distress, and was, the occasion of it, were so afflicted in way of humility and pity, that they raised the siege, and everyone returned to their own home. That is crazy to think that, yes, he's gone, oh, I'm losing? Well, then here, I'm going to offer my son that you may kill him. So in their despair, they turned around completely. Like after this war, they've just turned around. Crazy. Crazy to think that this all would be like that. But yeah, like I said, there's other things that are even more terrible. But let's not get into that right now. Let's talk about chapter 4. So a woman whose husband belonged to the sons of the prophets, so, great men, prophets, is left entirely destitute after his death. Now, I'm going to read a bit of the story, but keep in mind here that Josephus tells us that the unnamed widow that we're going to read about is actually the wife of the famous prophet that was spoken of, Obadiah. Remember him? He was the one that served King Ahab, but he hid prophets in a cave, 100 prophets in a cave, and he went and he looked after them so they wouldn't die. So Josephus also explains that so Obadiah had gone so heavily into debt because of his secretly borrowed money to buy food and sustain these 100 true prophets of God, that he hid in the cave, that he was now completely in debt, and well, he died, and now his widow. So under ancient law, if a debt could not be paid, a creditor had the legal right to seize family members as temporary bond servants to work off the balance. And so this is where it picks up here in verse 2. So verse 1. Thy servant, my husband, is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take him, my 2 sons, to be bondsmen. So that's why. They're not taking money, they're going, well, your sons can pay off the debt. Verse 2, and Elisha said unto her, what shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in the house? And she said, thine handmaid hath not anything in the house, save a pot of oil. So now Elisha tells her to go and borrow a bunch of empty vessels so that she, from her neighbors, says, borrow not a few, so as many as you can. So she's to go home, shut the door with her sons, and start pouring her tiny jar of oil into these large empty containers. So again, here's another miracle. Verse 5. And she went from him and shut the doors unto her and with her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said unto her sons, bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, there is not a vessel more, and the oil stayed. So all these vessels that she'd borrowed, they're all completely full, and there was still oil left. So Elisha now, he's just another incredible miracle, basically. So she tells the man of God, go and sell the oil to pay off the debtors, that she may live and the children may live. Incredible. And then it just goes on to another story. So Elisha passes through the town of Shunem, where a wealthy, is described as a great woman, but means wealthy, recognizes his holiness. She and her husband built a small private roof chamber for Elisha, furnished with a bed, a table, a stool, a candlestick, it describes. So, quite a nice place for him to rest. Now, wanting to repay their kindness, Elisha discovers that they have no children and her husband is old. So he prophesies to her in verse 16. About this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thine handmaid. Like, no, you're lying. There's no way that's going to happen. But years later, she has a child, then years later, the boy goes out to a field, whereas father is harvesting, or their harvest time. And suddenly he cries out, my head, in verse 19. My head, he said. The boy, obviously something happened to him, some kind of medical issue. I don't know. I'm no doctor. Something's happened. He's hurt his head quite badly. So he's carried off to his mother, sits on her knees until noon, and dies. So she lays with the boy on Elisha's bed, shuts the door, and saddles up a donkey. So she says to her husband, basically, I'm going to go see Elisha. And she says, it is well. Or in the Hebrew originally, simply says shalom. Peace, like peace be with you. I will find a way. So she rides now furiously. He says, slack not thy riding for me. So she tells him, man, don't slow down. Let's get up here as fast as possible. Goes to Mount Carmel, where Elisha sees her coming. Now he sends out his servants Gehazi ahead to ask if everything is okay. And she says to Gehazi, it is well. She's got this confidence in Elisha. So Elisha sends Gehazi ahead with the staff to lay on the boy's face, but nothing happens. Elisha arrives into the house, enters the room alone, and shuts the door. Now Elisha arrived and prayed to the Lord and said, he prayed to the Lord and he lay on him, maybe. It describes that he lay his mouth to his mouth, his hand to his hand. Like, it just sounds like he just lay basically on top of the child. Verse 34, and he went up and lay upon the child and put his mouth upon his mouth and his eyes upon his eyes and his hands upon his hands and stretched forth upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. And then it describes that the boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. So again, another miracle. And this is another example, an early example of someone being raised from the dead. Elijah did it. Now Elisha's done it. While sitting with the sons of the prophets at Gilgal, Elisha orders a large pot of stew to be boiled. One of the young men goes out to the field and gathers a lap full of wild gourds. I don't know what that is, but I did look a bit into it, and there's this vine native to the area that's highly toxic, and it does cause severe pain and can cause death. So that's what I'm thinking it probably is. Now, they shred it into the pot, completely unaware of what it is, and as they bring it to eat, a bitter toxicity hits them, and they scream. In verse 40, as they poured out the men to eat, it came to pass, as they were eating of the pottage, that they cried out and said, O thou man of God, there is death in the pot, and they could not eat thereof. So Elisha, he now takes, he doesn't dump the food as you would think. I mean, I would think. But he simply, he's a man of God. He simply throws a handful of meal or flour into the pot. And by a miracle, the toxicity is entirely neutralized, and the stew becomes perfectly safe for everyone to eat. And then one final thing that happens here in verse 42 to 44. And there came a man from Beth-Shelasha. I'm thinking if I read it fast, I can get it out. Baal-Shalisha, and brought the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley, and full ears of corn, and the husk thereof. And he said, Give unto the people that they may eat. And his servitor said, What should I set this before 100 men? He said again, Give the people that they may eat, for thus saith the Lord, they shall eat and shall leave thereof. So basically, here's what's happening. He's brought this food, but there's 100 people, and there's not enough to feed the 100 people. And Elisha's saying, Give it out. Okay, so he set it before them, and they did eat and left thereof, according to the word of the Lord. So they've got 20 barley leaves and some fresh ears of corn. Elisha commands to be distributed over these 100. And there's so much food that even afterwards, there's still left over, basically, and everyone's full. This mirrors the exact same thing, or, a very, very similar story of what Jesus will do years and years later. So now we're going to jump into chapter 5. Chapter 5 is really interesting. The next couple of chapters, some of my favorite stories. So I'm going to read a lot of these from the scriptures direct. And I know, you're listening to a podcast hoping that I could just tell you the answer, but obviously these are absolutely incredible and just so much better understood from the scriptures. So now Naaman, captain of the hosts of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. Now, why is he honorable and the Lord give deliverance unto Syria? So according to Jewish tradition, recorded by Josephus, Naaman was the unnamed Syrian archer who drew a bow. There is said drew a bow at adventure, so randomly during a battle at Ramoth Gilgad, and accidentally shot Ahab through the joints of the armor. So that's why it says there what it does about Naaman. Okay, so I'm going to skip around here. So it's halfway through verse 5, then I'm going to jump to verse 9. And he's a leper. And he departed and took unto him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 pence of gold and 10 charges of raiment. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth, and went away and said, Behold, I thought he will surely come out to me, and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place, and recover the leper. It's an interesting story how he went, well, I I've come to the prophet with all of this, and the least he could do is come out and do it. Like, I would thought he would come out, do this amazing, glorious thing, and my leprosy would be gone. But he's not. He's just sent a servant out. And verse 12, are not Abam and Para rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned away in a rage. So, okay, so not only has he gone and told me, or he's sent his servant out to go and tell me to go wash, but washing these dirty rivers? Like, I'm better than that. Give me a better way of doing things. Verse 13 and 14. And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do something, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then when he saith to thee, Wash and be cleaned? Then he went down and dipped himself 7 times in Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh became again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So his servants are the ones that convinced him, hey, if the prophet's saying this, you should really do what he says. So fine, I'll go and I'll do what he says. And it worked. Obviously, it's a miracle of God. Now, Naaman is so grateful that he tries to give Elisha gifts, but Elisha says in verse 16, But he said, As the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, and he refused. Like, this is not something that can be bought, or Elisha doesn't do things for the glory of men or for treasures. But now Gehazi, Elisha's servant, got greedy, and he took some of the gifts, let's say, that was for Elisha. So Elisha cursed him with the leprosy that Naaman had. So basically the leprosy was taken from Naaman and now put onto Gehazi. Interesting, very interesting. All right, let's go on to chapter 6. And chapter 6, I don't know why, but I find this story funny. I find it very funny, and every time I read it, I think that is so funny. Chapter 6, right at the beginning here. So Elisha and the sons of the prophets, they set up a place and they want to build a building, right? So they're chopping wood. Look, okay, it's a funny story to me. I don't know why, but here we go. Verse 5 and verse 6. But as one was felling a beam, the axe head fell into the water, and he cried and said, Alas, master, for it was borrowed. I find that so funny because, you imagine them chopping wood. He flicks the axe back, the head breaks off and falls into the water. Oh, man, it's not even mine. I borrowed it. Like, oh, man, Jim's going to be so mad at me. It was his. And I just find it's just a funny situation. And then the miracle in verse 6. And the man of God said, Where fell it? And he showed him the place. And he cut down a stick and cast it thither, and the iron did swim. So he's thrown a stick into the water, and the head of the axe has floated to the top. So again, an incredible miracle, but I don't know, very funny to me. And one of my absolute favorite stories in the Old Testament is this next story here. So I'll introduce the story and tell you what's happening, and then we'll get into it. So the king of Syria is launching secret ambushes against Israel. However, every single time the Syrians set up a trap, Elisha receives word from God and warns the king of Israel, completely ruining the Syrian military strategy. So the Syrian king assumes that he has a traitor in his inner circle. But his servants correct him and say in verse 12, And one of his servants said, None, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet that is in Israel telleth the king of Israel the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber. So no, it's none of us. We haven't said anything. Elisha gets this word. It's interesting, isn't it? Because, well, how did he get the word then? Well, God must be speaking to him. Unless they think that he is some kind of charlatan, like, I can see the future, maybe they think the devil's trying to trick them, not sure. And knowing no one thinks they're bad guys, so obviously they must think they're good guys and they're doing the right thing. Anyway, I'm just assuming there, but this isn't about assumptions. This is all trying to be as factual as possible. So that was just my 2 cents. Anyway, best story. Here we go. This is verse 13 to verse 19. And he said, Go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And it was told him, saying, Behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host. And they came by night and compassed the city about. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host encompassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? So, Elisha's servant that was with him was surrounded. What are we going to do? Elisha, for he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and beheld, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire around Elisha. And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto the Lord and said, Smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. And Elisha said unto them, This is not the way, neither is the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom ye seek. But he led them to Samaria. How amazing is that? We'll get into the next bit in a second, but my goodness. Imagine that. Oh no, there's a whole bunch of people coming, and Elisha, don't even worry about it. There's so much more people with us. And the boy's eyes were open and saw angels, essentially. Chariots of the Lord. Horses and chariots, and just what an absolute amazing thing to see. The other part as well is interesting. So Elisha prays that they're all blind, so they all become blind. And Elisha says, Hey, you're in the wrong spot. Let me take you to the right place where you need to go. So he takes them down, but he takes them to Samaria. And the king of Israel is ecstatic and asks Elisha if he should slaughter them all. You brought them here, should we slaughter them? And Elisha basically firmly says, No, we don't kill prisoners of war whom you didn't fight. Instead, he commands the king to throw a massive feast for his enemies and send them home. Which this radical, I guess, a radical act of kindness completely stops the border raids for a long time. So now this, for a while now, or for a few years, there is a little bit of peace, or a peace enough that the borders aren't being attacked by the Syrians. Now, after a few years, there came a famine, and the famine was awful. Here's one thing that is described by the famine, verse 25. And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it unto an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and the fourth part of a cab of a dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. So the prices of everything have shot up because there's not much. So much so that they're eating donkeys' heads and dung of doves, and they're even selling them as food. Like, that is awful. That's a bad famine, but it gets worse. Verse 26, and then 28 and 29. And as the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, Help, my lord, O king. And the king said unto her, What aileth thee? And she answered, This woman said unto me, Give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son, and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, Give thy son, that we may eat him. And she hath hid her son. Awful. I mean, there's a terrible famine in the land, but I mean, people are resorting to absolute extreme means. But now the king, he blames Elisha for what's happening. And, he says to him that this is, anything's happening because you've arrived and this has come from you. Straight into chapter 7 here, verse 1 and 2. Then Elisha said, Hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, Tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel, in the gate of Samaria. So, well, they're selling dung right now for, what did I say it was, 5 pieces of silver. And now they're going to sell this by tomorrow, this time tomorrow, this commodity of flour, fine flour that would be, I don't know, many, many gold pieces of silver. They're going to sell for a mere shekel. Like, how are they going to get that much in time, in within this period of time? Verse 2. Then a Lord on whose hand the king leaned answered the man of God and said, Behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? And he said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shall not eat thereof. So this basically this man of the king is almost mocked Elisha and gone, even if the Lord had a window, he wouldn't even be able to throw down enough in time. So Elisha said, well, because you're of little faith, your cursing now is that you will see the abundance, but you won't get to enjoy it. Now, I'll just explain the next story because it's sort of, there's so much to it. I'm going to try and get all the bits out of it. So sitting outside the closed gates of the city are 4 lepers. And they said to each other that either we go into the city that have a famine and will die, or we die here, or how about this for a third option? We go to the army of the Syrians and be their prisoner, and then we might eat. These 3 options, they all pretty much end in death. So, but maybe we'll get a meal out of it. Maybe we be a prisoner and we eat, or they kill us. Either way, we're going to die. So the 4 lepers go to the Syrian camp expecting to be captured or killed, but instead they find the entire camp completely deserted. Verse 6, For the Lord hath made the host of the Syrians to hear a noise of chariots and a noise of horses, even the noise of a great host. And they said one to another, Lo, the king of Israel hath hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come upon us. So they're expecting that the king of Israel has gathered all of these people together to go and fight against them, and they've panicked and they've left. In Australia, there's a bird called the lyrebird, and it is amazing. It can mimic anything. And I remember it mimicking a chainsaw once, and how scary is that? Imagine hearing a chainsaw at night, but it just being a lyrebird. And I imagine something like this. Either this was the horse and chariots that were not seen by them that Elijah had seen, or this was something in nature that was able to mimic these things that absolutely terrified the Syrians, that in the dead of night they left, leaving behind everything. They left behind their tents, their horses, their donkeys, their weapons, and massive, fully stocked piles of food and treasures. Verse 8, And when these lepers came to the uttermost part of the camp, they went into one tent and did eat and drink, and carried thence silver and gold and raiment, and went and hid it. And came again and entered into another tent and carried thence also, and went and hid it. So they were just having a great old time. Now, this is very interesting for these lepers that were going to be killed in the city if they went in for being lepers. And they said one to another, We do not well. This day is a day of good tidings, and we hold our peace. If we tarry till the morning light, some mischief will come upon us. Now therefore come, that we may go and tell the king's household. So they're going to go and they're going to tell everyone about this incredible thing that they've found. So when the news reaches the king, he suspects it as a trap. He assumes the Syrians are hiding in the hills nearby, waiting for the servants, waiting for the starving citizens to go and pour into there and ambush them. So one of his wiser servants suggests sending out 5 of their remaining starving horses with scouts to investigate. The scouts all ride down to the River Jordan and find the entire highway littered with garments, weapons, heavy vessels that the panicked Syrians had thrown out of the chariots and sped away to escape. So not only is it their camp, but it's a big trail. So now the news hits Samaria like an explosion, and the city gates are thrown wide open, and the starving, desperate population all stampede out to the valley to plunder the Syrian camp. And the king appoints the very same Lord that mocked Elisha to manage the traffic flow. Do you imagine all of the people desperate? Go in there, let's organize this food, let's get the food, let's basically let's sort it in a way that is in orderly fashion. But in the rush to get the food, the starving crowd trample the Lord to death in the gateway. So it's interesting here. So that happens, and that's the story. But then it the chapter goes and emphasizes what's happened. And I'm going to read that for you here. It says, and the king appointed the Lord on whose hand he leaned. This is verse 17 to 20. Whose hand he leaned to have charge on the gate, and the people trod upon him on the gate, and he died, as the man of God had said, who spake unto the king, who spake when the king came down to him. And it came to pass, as the man of God had spoken to the king, saying, 2 measures of barley for a shekel, and a measure of fine flour for a shekel, shall be tomorrow about this time in the gate of Samaria. And the Lord answered the man of God and said, Now behold, if the Lord shall make windows in heaven, might such thing be? And he said, Behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not eat thereof. And so it fell upon him, for the people trod upon him in the gate, and he died. So interesting there's really emphasizing what Elisha has said did come about. He did see it. He did see the camp, the food, and everything, but he was trampled. So the things that Elisha said is true. Really, really interesting there that it highlights there. Also that God's word regarding the abundance of food. It came down to the exact penny. So it does say in verse 16. So it's really interesting, isn't it, that what these things actually came about, but it emphasizes the point that this is the miracles that the Lord has provided. In case you missed it, basically is how I read it. In case you missed it, everything that Elisha has said has come about. And Elisha is a true man of God and a true prophet of God. And every time that I'm talking with someone who isn't of our faith, I always bring it back to the importance of prophets. Because without prophets, where would we be? Would be with every other religion confused about what the Bible's actually saying. Oh, we have a Book of Mormon. Well, if we don't have a prophet to explain it to us or to help guide us, some people might take what the Book of Mormon says and take it into a different path. In fact, there is religions out there that have decided, well, this is what the Book of Mormon how we should read. So it's really fascinating that, prophets of God have always been around. They've always been important, and what they say does come about. And it's up to us to have the faith to believe in them, no matter how extremely insane it sounds, like 2-hour church instead of 3. Anyway, thanks for listening to another episode of If You Could Hide to Call Our podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. If you want to watch the videos of me sitting here trying to explain these stories on YouTube, you can look on that, Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all those other places. So thank you. I'll see you next week.